We are live, and this is CSS's Great Fun Time, presented by me. Awesome. Cool, so let me start by saying that this is a lecture that I put together myself from scratch, so if there's a couple of rough edges or patches, just let me know. I would love some feedback after class. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. So CSS, huh? Have you guys felt like this guy? Have you guys been doing some of this already? Yeah. Trying to fix it? Almost got it. All right, so CSS is, it's not like programming regularly. It's not like regular programming language. There's a lot of different rules that interact with each other that make your code just, it's not as neat as like JavaScript or Ruby, where you just have a set of rules and the rules always play the same way. With CSS, there's a bunch of different rules that kind of interact with each other, and there's a cascade effect that takes place, and that's why sometimes you're trying to target a specific element and then things just kind of go to crap. So let's see what we got next. We're going to start talking about HTML a little bit, because we got to use HTML to be able to put the stuff on our page first, and then CSS is what styles it. Who knows if there's a difference between HTML4 and HTML5 here? Okay, so HTML4 is the old HTML spec, which didn't include any of the semantic tags. Like when we use our tags now, we put like footer in the footer tag header, where before everything was just a div, which were all these blocks, and they didn't mean anything to the browser. So with HTML5, we have these new blocks that actually mean something to the browser, and it's called semantic HTML, which allows us to just kind of organize our code a little better and understand what each section of the code is without just writing a bunch of divs. Divs were originally just as a means to divide information. They were just an extra block level tag, and then people just decided to use them as a way to reorganize our code, and they grew into this big thing that it wasn't supposed to. But it's good. I mean, that's kind of the way that the web grew. And from that, we started using them to style pretty much all the components on a page. So whenever we start coding up our stuff now and moving forward, let's try to use the HTML5 semantic tags as opposed to just using a bunch of divs. I also don't always follow my own advice, just because divs are just I'm so used to using them. But if you guys are starting fresh and like, you know, this is what you're learning, definitely try to use semantic 5 HTML tags wherever you can. It'll be fine if you use divs, nothing's gonna break, but it's a good way to keep your code organized. With HTML tags also, we have a normal document flow. What that means is that there's whatever you put like towards the top is going to be towards the top, and then elements just kind of fall down and stack on each other. So if we see something like this would probably be the first thing that we put up top, this div over here. Then maybe this next section, which is sidebar, over here is nav. Okay, maybe that would be the next line of your code that you would put. Then you would have this main section as the next line of code that you put, and then within that main section you wrap it all in this main tag, and then you add your different stuff that's the content of your HTML and whatever kind of tags you're going to use. So article can maybe have many p tags nested inside of it also. So this normal document flow just lets your page flow kind of stack one on top of the other. And then footer would be the last thing that we normally have on our page, which would be all the way at the bottom here. How do we feel about that? Awesome. Okay, cool. So there are two types of tags. Sorry for the brightness and the darkness, but didn't really think that through. So there's two different types of tags that we have in HTML. One's called the block level tag, and the other ones are inline tags. Does anyone know what the difference between a block level and an inline tag is?
I would assume block level is going to affect more than, like an inline tag is going to affect like one line code or one specific thing, and blocks are going to affect like a bigger chunk of.
Yeah, kind of. So a block level tag, what it does is it spans the entire length of your content. So the entire width is a block level tag, and then it stacks one on top of the other. Where an inline tag would be inline, and you could have many inline tags next to each other. You could even wrap things inside an inline tag. For instance, if you guys have a paragraph tag and then you put an anchor tag, which is a link, inside of that, then that link is just going to be inline as opposed to stacking below your paragraph. That kind of wouldn't make any sense, right? So that's pretty much the big difference. So just try to keep in mind that there's kind of like the sectioning, the stuff that provides sections for your code is going to be a block level tag, and the stuff that's going to be just kind of flowing through is going to be an inline level tag. All right, so activity time. Let's see, code demo 1. Let me get out of here. How do I exit, escape, technical problems. So, over here I'm going to show you guys the basic document flow. Let me make this a little bigger for everybody. Okay, so here is the body tag, which usually just wraps everything that we have. We have an H1 tag, which an H1 tag is a block level tag. Then we have a couple of P tags. These are also block level tags. Okay, then we have a P tag with the span. Now spans, like a link tag, are inline tags. And then we have an image tag, which again, it's a inline tag. So up here we have the styles for that. Over here we're targeting the body. Okay, so the width of the entire body is just going to be 500 pixels. Our P tags are going to have a nice salmon color, as we can see here. And then our span tags are going to be white. So you're going to be able to see all the different blocks. The P tags are all going to be one block. The H1 is a block by itself. It's going to be at the top. Okay. And then the span is going to be white with a black border. The spans are right here, and right here. So if we open this up in the browser, okay, so here we have the H1 again. H1s, all the H's are block level tags, and then all the P tags are block level tags, and then we have these inline elements, which are spans that we were able to style inside of the block. Cool? Any questions on that so far? What's up?
How'd you get the borders?
How do we get the borders? Okay, so if we go back to the HTML, the P tag itself has a border of 2 pixels solid, and then whatever this color is. So we could put maybe 5 pixels here, or 10, so it'll be fatter. Now you have a fatter border tag there. Okay, cool. Any other questions on this? No, cool. All right. So now the way that we select things, let me see. The way that we select things in HTML is through specificity. So we have different things that target things more strongly than others. So this is our CSS, okay? So this is called a selector in CSS. This is called a block. Okay, and then everything from here to here is called a rule set. Okay, so all these that say body, this is a tag element from our HTML. A P is a tag element from HTML. A span is a tag element. We also have classes that we can add. Okay, we also have IDs that we can add, and we can add inline styles. Now all these things have different specificity, so some things are going to override others. With tags like this, the more that you have, like let's say I had body, P, okay? This is going to be more specific than this. So let's say I wanted to change the color of the background to my favorite color. Nah, that's not it. Goldenrod. Yeah. Goldenrod. Yeah. So that's actually like a CSS color that is standard. It's crazy. So much fun. So now, because we did body P, okay, it's a little more specific, so it's gonna it should overwrite this one. So if we come here, and that overrode that style. Okay, even though we have a P style, it's further down here. Okay. So if we have a class, now let's say I gave this guy here a class of first. So all our first paragraphs, if we're gonna have like a bunch of content, we wanna style them a little differently. We come here and we go back to our code, and instead of P, we could do first, and we're gonna give this a background of my second favorite color, and this would be fire brick. All right. So when we have a class, even though it's just one class, it's gonna override the P tag, even though this has more selectors attached to it. So we have body and P. It seems like it's more specific. However, a class selector is going to be more is going to have more strength in determining who's going to win out. So if we come back over here, now that guy is fire brick red, and all our other stuff is the other colors. Does that make sense to everybody? Questions so far? What's up?
Is there a difference between background and background color?
There isn't. Background is just shorthand for a bunch of other things that you could do. Like you could add a background image, background color, and it allows you to do it all in one shot. I like being a little more specific and just doing background color. Because when you use just general tags like background, it could override your style. So over here I've got background, but background color is a little more specific. So what could happen here is I could change this to a URL, and it'll know that now it's got to be an image instead of a color for the background. Any other questions? What's up?
What if the first body P overrides the second P?
How did it override it?
Yeah, usually if you computer, you just read everything line by line, so I assume that the body P will assign this color, and then it gets to...
Yeah, so it's about
and then I assume that it will override the other color.
So it does if you have multiple styles of the same specificity and order. Okay, so if we had like a bunch of P tags, the last P tag will override the ones above it.
Yeah.
But because we have two tags, we have body and P, it's a little more specific on our selection. So that's the reason why the top one can override the bottom one, because it's more more specific essentially. So yeah, that's the tricky thing about CSS. Without knowing like the basic rules first, like you don't realize and you start banging your head against the wall because you know, these things happen and you think, oh, it should work, but really specificity is one of the key things that I hope you guys all take away from this today, because that's really the way that, like when your styles are clashing, you don't know what's happening, you probably have another style that's a little more specific overriding your styles. So with that being said, let me ask you guys a question. What would happen if I do what do you guys think is going to happen here now?
It's going to be green.
It's going to be green. Anybody else? Okay, cool. Yeah, so it is going to be green. When you have an inline style, the inline style is the most powerful of them all. So it's going to override your other styles. So if we come back over here, now we have green. So have you guys seen the important keyword before? Yeah. So the important keyword is used whenever you want to override an inline style, or you want to override another style that's maybe like a div. So if we come back to body P and we put important here, I think this should work. Yeah. So we can override inline styles by writing important on there. But the inline style is the strongest of all the styles, and it's always going to win out unless you put that important key on there. So try not to put your styles in line, because they're going to be hard to retarget them when you want to change them to something else. So always try to remember to keep your specificity as low as possible from the beginning, instead of going for the big guns of like doing inline style. Besides classes, we also have another selector. Anybody know what that is?
ID.
The ID. Okay. So then the ID tag is more has more specificity than the first tag and all the other tags below it. So if you use an ID, that's actually the strongest of them all, except for the inline style. So if we wanted to, let's say we got rid of, let's go to the second one here, P ID equals second. And let's give it a class name too. Class equals second. Okay, and then let's say we selected second here, and this is the ID, and we're gonna make the background color aquamarine. Oh. Okay, and if we do second, now this is a class selector. Guys, notice the difference. The IDs have a hash symbol, the class selectors have a period. And over here, the background color is gonna be white smoke. So, but let's make it even more specific. We're gonna put a P tag, and we're gonna say second. So even though we have a P tag and a class variable, we're still gonna be able to, the CSS is still gonna choose the first rule set because it's an ID, so it's more specific. So if we go back over here, ID second, class second. Okay, cool. What am I doing wrong here? Oh, do I have important here? Yep. Okay, so aquamarine is overriding this style, even though the style falls later in the cascade, later in the style sheet. And it looks like it's more specific because it's got two items. It's got a paragraph tag and a second tag here. Okay, does that make sense for everybody? What's up?
So is the only difference between ID and class just ID has like higher priority? Like they work exactly the same otherwise?
Pretty much, and you should only have one ID per page that you have. Where class, you can have many classes in the same page. Okay. So an ID should only be limited to one.
Okay.
Anybody else? Cool. So again, when we talk about specificity, let's keep in mind that this becomes an arms race. So always try to start by specifying just your tags first. Try to use tags as much as you can. Then if you need to be more specific, then move on to classes. And then after you've done classes, let's say you want to override another class, use a couple of tags in front of it, then use the class name so you can override it because it'll be a little more specific. And then finally, use the IDs. And the ID should really be like a last resort when it comes to styling, because if you got to change it later, or if you got something else that that needs to change, then you're gonna have to name it something kind of similar, because it's a better idea to go as least specific as possible when you're styling, and then work your way up to the higher specificities. All right, cool. So let's see, where were we? We were here. CSS is great fun. Okay, so this is a cool little chart on how you can calculate specificity. So you have your inline styles, your ID, your class, and your elements. Okay, so this is the highest priority, and then this comes down to the lowest. So if you have like a 10 here and a 1 here, this 1 is still going to take priority over all of this. So let's call this like one element. Let's say this was a P tag. Okay, and let me see. You know what? Skip that example. I'm gonna confuse you guys instead. But just the higher the number to the left, the more specific it's going to be. So if you have two similar selectors, and one of them has an inline style, and the other one, even if it has a 10 over here, if it's got 10 IDs being selected after the other, the inline style is going to win, even though you only have one single inline style. So just keep this in mind when you guys are choosing your selectors. So these are two rules of thumb. Don't use IDs in your selectors, and don't use important. Obviously, these are just rules of thumb. You could definitely use those depending on your use case. So there's other ways that we can also gain, get our styles, and it makes things a little wonky or a little weird, and that's through inheritance. So your elements can inherit other styles too. So usually this is limited to just text styles. So if you give like the body tag a color of green, okay, then all your text, even all its children in the header, in the H1, in the main, whatever's text is also going to inherit the color green. Or if you give it a font family of whatever, serif, then all your elements that are text-based are going to inherit that font family of serif. Does that make sense for everybody? Cool, awesome. So other styles that, or other selectors that can have inheritance are the lists, so ULs and LIs, and your tables. So tables also have inheritance. Awesome. So the box model and DevTools. Who's heard of the box model here? What is it?
It's like it's in your inspect tools, and you just you can use this. It's like in the like the first link you have the element, and you can like navigate with your inspector, like your cursor or whatever. Click on a specific element, and then modify it in the inspect tool.
Cool. Yeah, that's exactly right. So our browsers come with something called DevTools. And essentially in every browser, we have one for Chrome, we have one for Firefox, even Safari has one, even though I don't think anyone's developing for the web on Safari. But yeah, it's there. Internet Explorer has one. Inside of that, you're going to be able to see your elements, and you're going to be able to see the boxes around all your elements. So the box model essentially means that each element that you have has different things. Essentially, it's your main content, which is the stuff that's inside of it. Okay. Then the padding means that the element will grow from the inside, okay, up until around the border. So if you give this guy here like a color of yellow, and then you give it padding, like your padding will also take on that color of yellow, but your element will stay in the center here, and this will just grow outward. All right. Border is the border around your element, and we just saw that with the example earlier when we changed the border to 5 pixels. You could also see your border. So if you give your border a color, or if you give it solid or dash, like you're going to be able to see the changes on the border. And then margin is a it's kind of like an invisible border around your stuff, and it's to give yourself space between elements. So your margin is going to be invisible. Margin is a little tricky, because when you guys have 2 elements of margin that butt up against each other, the larger one collapses the smaller one. So if you have 16 here, and then you have another thing that's got margin here of 32, it's going to collapse, and then the 16 is going to be all the way, you're going to have no margin here, and then you're going to have the 32 from side to side, which gives us kind of a tricky situation when we're trying to space our stuff out. Let's see. Okay, so one thing I didn't talk about a few minutes ago was when we were talking about the styles. So selectors also have a style, pseudo selectors like hover, active, all those things that we use. If we open this guy up, what color will I be? And we look at the style here. Oh no, this isn't the example that I wanted. But anyway, what color will this guy be here? And it's, let me open this code back up for you guys. No, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry guys. All right, so what color will this guy be if we go back to the style? Here we've got a class of header and a class of title, an ID of title. Okay, cool. All right. And now when we have links, the reason why you're always going to see links in this order is because of the cascade that we spoke about a minute ago. So I'm sorry I skipped this and I jumped to the box model a little early. But when you have a link, initially you want it to be blue, then when it's visited, purple. If you want it to hover, then we underline, and then when we click on it, it's red. If we move these things around, it's gonna break because the order of this doesn't matter. So if we take a look at this, and here we have a link. When we hover over it, it gets underlined. If I click it, now it's purple. Okay, and if I hold the click, you can see that it turns red. And if I hold the click, you can see that it turns red, right? So if I were to, let's say, move this thing up, and now I'm here, and I refresh, and I try to click again, and I'm clicking, it's active, but nothing's happening. So the reason why that happened is because that got overridden by the other styles. So a link and then a visited. A visited falls later down the line. So that way, it's overriding both the link and the active. Does that make sense to you guys? Cool. All right, back to the box model. Does anybody have any questions on the box model so far?
You said something like the inheritance stuff. So if I try to set like a background image, like on just like the whole page, would that also like cascade down, or like in all the other boxes, or?
No. So it's usually only with text, tables, and lists that you're gonna have inheritance passing down its values. So over here, I created a little box for us to play with some. It's option B. Okay, so what we have here is an outer div and then 3 inner divs. Okay, the outer div has a background color of light sky blue. The inner, and a width of 700 pixels. Let's keep that in mind. The inner has a width of 200 pixels. The second inner one has 200 and then 100. So altogether we have 500 pixels and 200 pixels left over to play with. Okay, so if we go back, this is the other guy that's 700 pixels and it's got its other 200 pixels that are here that are left over. Okay, so what would happen if I put margin on box 2 to the left and to the right of it? There'll be a space. And what color do you think that space would be?
It depends. No, clear. White. It'd be white.
It'll be white. Okay, let's find out. So we're going to do margin and 0 for up and down. And then we're going to do, let's do 50. 50 pixels for left and right. What's that?
Does it have to be separated, like with a comma or anything?
No. So when you're doing multiple styles, we can do up to 4 sides in one go. So the way that this works is the first one, if I just did this, I forgot the PX. If I just did 0 pixels, that means all the way around, I want a margin of 0 pixels, all the way around. Okay? So if I do this, now this means that this is the top and the bottom, and this is the left and the right. So the left and the right are going to get 50 pixels, and the top and the bottom are going to get 0 pixels. Okay? And then if you can actually do all 4 sides in one go.
I did a third one, each one works.
So if I did a third one here, this would be the top. I believe this would give it to the top right. So this will give it to the bottom. So you're gonna have top right is gonna be 50 pixels, and the bottom is gonna have 10 pixels. So it goes top, right, bottom, left. Yeah. And if you guys need help remembering that, is think of trouble. TRBL. Trouble. Yeah. Stay out of it. All right, cool. So, yeah, so let's go back to our 50 pixels here.
Oh, blue.
So why is that blue?
Because the blue said like 7 pixels, right?
Well, the blue is the
Oh, yeah.
element that's behind everything, so it's all the way in the back. So that's the reason why when you add that margin, you see that blue on the sides. So yeah. So let me make this bigger here too. Let me hide this guy. Yeah, so this guy is 700 pixels. Okay, so then what happened here to this guy, the inner two, it actually grew in size. So it was 200 pixels plus 50 pixels on each side. So now this guy became 300 pixels. Okay, and we can get to a point where we're gonna overflow out of this area if we just keep adding more margin. So if we did like a margin of 150 pixels, what do you guys think is gonna happen here? You got it. So let's take a look. So it flows out of the container and it goes down below it. So one of the reasons why this thing extended downward like this is because I did something called the clear fix. Okay, so this is the outer container. If I got rid of this tag here, actually let's not talk about floats yet and clearing. How does everybody feel about this margin stuff? Do you kind of see what it does now, how it's invisible and it just makes the item give itself a little space on the outside?
What about padding?
Cool, so we'll talk about padding now. So what padding is gonna do, let's also give it a, you know what, let's leave that there how we had it. And let's put this guy at 50 pixels. If we do padding, let's give it a border first so you guys can see the border around this guy. Okay, so you see the margin is extending out to the sides. Okay, look at what happened down here too when we added a border. It pushed this guy down a little bit. Okay, so this one element is making the entire container outside of it longer. All right, and we're gonna keep that in mind for a few minutes from now when we start talking about floats, how that's actually pushing that down. And then if we added padding, you're gonna see that not much has changed except for the size of that particular middle item. So we're gonna add 50 pixels up and down. Okay, and what padding does, is it just makes that guy grow out from within. So the border and everything stretches out. So you guys give it you can give it a little more breathing room on the inside. So if something ever feels too cluttered, like a button for instance, you give it a little more padding and the button will open up and it'll get fatter on you so that you can have like a nice looking button instead of a button just covered in like just a box right away. So let's say this box number 2 was a button. If we come back over here and we get rid of its width and height, okay, and this is going to be a, let's call it button. See how little it is? Okay, we got rid of its width and we got rid of its height. Now if we give it padding, it's going to open up a little bit for us. And we refresh, now it's got a little more room. Okay, what's up?
How do we give it like rounded edges?
So that's a property called border radius. And sorry, I can't type. And then you can give this either percentages, pixels, it depends on what you want to do. And most of these things, instead of pixel widths, we can give it percentages, M's and Rems. And we'll talk about those units another day. What's up?
Can you do negative pixels?
You can do negative pixels too. I'm not sure for the border radius if you can, I've never tried that, but let's give it 10 pixels regular first and see what happens. And now the border's got a little rounded. All right, and the more you do, the more rounded it gets. So if you wanted to do like a circle, you could do like 50%. And it'll give you a circle looking thing. Cool? Any questions on that so far? How are we feeling overall? Good? Awesome. All right. So the way that I got these things to line up next to each other is I floated them to the left. Normally, if I don't float items, what happens is that they stack one on top of the other because these are block level elements. These are divs, right? So this should really be this guy over here, button here, and then box 3 should be down here, okay? So I'm gonna get rid of the float so you guys can see what happens if we don't float this, and float this. And we no longer need that clear fix, but it's not hurting anything. Actually, maybe the display table is hurting something, so let's get rid of this clear fix. So you guys seen what happened there? So now the elements just kind of fall next to each other. So the way that we get elements to sit next to each other is by floating them either left or right. So if you want things to just kind of fall to the left, you can just float them like we did. And all we do is we add a attribute of float left, okay? And then the elements will fall next to each other. And then you could add the padding or whatever margin that you need for those elements. Does that make sense so far with floats and how floats work? Okay, now floats are kind of tricky because there's this thing that happens. This is a bug in all browsers. It's been around for ages. And it's called the clear fix bug. And what ends up happening is that if you have elements inside your containing div that are floated that are taller than the containing element, okay, the containing element is gonna collapse down to 0 height. And that's been around since God knows who, since the beginning of the interwebs. So to do that, there's this hack called the clear fix hack to fix it, and you could just Google this. I Google it all the time, and it's just, you set the content equal to just an empty string, you do clear both, and you display table, and then that'll bring your height back. So if we make these all float again, and I'm gonna show you an example of that in a minute here.
The outer doesn't have to float?
Huh?
The outer doesn't.
No, because the outer is the containing element. So the outer contains everything.
So how do we know which side it's going to be on, though? If it's going to be on left or right or in the middle or what?
Oh, because of the order that we have them in. So remember, there's a normal document flow, so it'll float left to right. So here's the outer. This is just a containing div, all right? And then we have box 1, button, and then box 3, all right? And they're all just, if we float them all left, they're all just going to stack next to each other on the left. So what happens to the blue? It collapsed. Yeah. So, and that's because we didn't do this clear fix hack here that we have. Okay, and all we do is we add that class or clear fix, and now it's back. Okay? So that's something to keep in mind. That's a little tricky thing, and you're like, oh man, why is everything like butting up against the top and not pushing down? If that ever happens, and like you have all your elements like butting up against each other at the top, and you can't figure out why, you probably have a clear fix situation, especially if you specifically if you're using floats. So keep that in mind. If you're using floats, you might run into this problem where things are butting up against each other. Floats. Okay. So does anybody have any questions so far on the padding, the margin, any of that stuff? Cool. All right. So code number 5, we've got this guy here, and we're gonna style it like if it was a web page. So we're gonna do option B to open this up. And wow, this looks crap. So it's the Flatiron Connect 4 Club. Come join us. The Flatiron Connect 4 Club meets every Friday at 5 p.m. on the 8th floor of 11 Broadway to connect with friends, have some light refreshments, flip a few cups, and connect 4. All are welcome. Bring a deck of cards for extra fun. Follow us on Twitter. Check us out on Instagram. Copyright 2019. Iron Connect. Flatiron. Ooh, typo. All right, cool. So what we want to do is we want to style this guy a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to put this as a header with some nice color. Float this guy to the left somehow, and then float this guy to the right, and then kind of just make it look pretty. So I'm going to show you what we want to do. Oh. We want it to kind of look like that. Okay. And so, what is one of the first things that you guys think we should do here to get this style up and going? So this is, we're gonna work this as a team together. How are we feeling, everybody? Just real quick, by the way, before we move forward. Anybody wanna get up and stretch, or move your feet, twinkle your toes, hop around? No, we're good? Awesome. All right, Kayla's got something to do. There we go. She's got to be able to see the board. All right, cool. So what's one of the first things we should do? What's up? Fix a typo, yeah, for sure. All right. Let me put this here, style, and we're gonna style right in there. Yeah, so the Flatiron Connect. Guys, this is last night at like midnight. I apologize for the typos, but all right. What should we do?
Style the header.
Style the header. Okay, great. So, what tag do we use? H1. Okay. And what do we want to do to that H1?
Make it that color green background.
The background color.
Background color. Okay. And that was a teal. Okay. So, so what are we styling here? This guy, right? Background color teal. Now, let's take a look if that works. All right, cool. So, what else should we do first? Next.
Make the font white.
Okay.
Color.
I believe I used white smoke. Okay, cool.
Make the header like reach towards the ends of the page.
Make the header reach towards the end of the page. So all the way to here and all the way to here.
Yeah.
I didn't have that in my style, but I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that happens is that the browser comes with its own styles. So the body has a margin that is set by the browser itself. So in order to override these little things that we have on the sides, that's called the user agent styles. They're really easy to override. All we have to do is add our own body tag here. Okay, and we could give this a margin of 0. We don't have to put pixels or anything, just 0 and it'll know. Okay, and now we go all the way to the end.
Nice.
Okay, so always keep that in mind. If you have some sort of conflicting styles like that, it might be the body itself or other things, like for instance H1 tags. All the H's have a style of different sizes. If you've noticed that if you use like an H1 tag, it's going to be bigger than an H4 tag. But why does that happen? That's because of the user agent style, the browser style sheet that's changing those styles for you. Cool, so what should we do next?
Make that thick. The H1 looks much bigger, right?
Yeah, so we had a fatter like interior of this guy, right? So maybe padding? What are we gonna give it? 10 pixels. Okay. I don't think it was centered. I think everything was up to the left. But we could center if we wanted to. All we would do is text line. Oh. So let's make it our own. Let's not Let's not go by the style sheet. What else do we want to do to this thing?
Put links on to that kind of, you know?
Put what?
Put like a link or something.
Put a link?
Yeah.
Where?
I don't know somewhere. To the left. To the right.
All right, let's skip the link thing. Let's. So now this guy here, this was 2 elements, right? This was one on the left, or I'm sorry, this was one on the left, and then this one was one on the right, and then these were like their own little colors, and this was the footer at the bottom. You guys want to go just for the footer, maybe? I think that'll be an easy one, right? Footer. Oh. Background color teal. What was it? Color white. Smoke. White smoke. Good catch. Almost messed that up. All right, and let's give it some padding too. I'll make it a little fatter. Padding. What did we do with the other one? 10 pixels. 10 pixels, and that gives padding all the way around to all 4 corners. Remember, if I just did 10 and then 0 here, I could literally just give it padding to the top and the bottom and not the left and the right. So it goes top, bottom, left, right if we're using a shortcut for the padding. See that? And should we text align this too? Why not?
Didn't you want it to go right?
Well, we're working on the footer now. So maybe these guys here, we do want to float right. Or this guy, we might want to float right. But we could literally just float them both left if we wanted to, because they're just going to fall next to each other, and then we have to do something to give this middle guy a little bit of margin in between the two. So, come join us. Let's do this one. What's that? So we have a main class, right? That's in a container. And then we have a sidebar that's also in the container, and the sidebar has a widget. So what do you guys think we should do here?
Don't you use like the dot main?
The dot main, yeah. So we can come up here, go back to the style, and dot main, and we're gonna float it left. Oh. All right. Now our body also on the other one had a different color, so let's do that. I think I had light gray. I love that we could just name these colors now. Like at one point it was just like red, yellow, green. Now they have like hundreds of names. It's amazing. And now you have to like try to remember the color codes. All right, so now the body is light gray. And then the main, the body was white smoke. Yeah, I think that's my new favorite one. Forget goldenrod.
Is that your Twitter handle also?
White smoke.
Yeah.
I think I had something for you guys. I had a little hidden.
The end text right there.
That's all.
It should be an actual color.
It should be an actual color. We gotta send that recommendation out. So I'm sorry we didn't. I forgot about it when we were doing the last activity. Cool. So what are we doing here? Okay, so we gave it a color of white smoke, and now we want to do the same thing for the widget, or for the sidebar and the widgets, right? So, oh. Now, here's the thing. This is a certain length from end to end, right? So if I float this guy left, it's just going to fall at the bottom too, because these are block level elements. So it's going to take the entire length of whatever its parent container is. So how do we restrict the length of this guy here, the come join us section, the main section? Give it a width. And let's give it a width of what, like 70%? we do that, and there it is. Cool. All right, and then the sidebar, we're floating left. What should we give this guy a width of, or we should give it a color maybe? So there it is, but now we've got this footer doing this crazy thing here. And that's because this guy's width is shorter, and it's also floating, so the next guy is just stacking up right here. So let's try to give this guy a width of 30%. All right, cool. This footer, we want to, when we do floats, the things next to it just kind of fall into place. Now over here in this particular situation, we don't have to do a clear fix because it's smaller than the parent container. All we want to do is we want to clear this guy and put it below this stuff here. So with the footer, all we have to do is do clear both, and it'll clear both elements, left and right. Okay, and now the footer is back at the bottom.
Would you put something else if there were more than two elements?
What's that?
Like you put clear both because there were two things before, would you put clear something else?
Yeah, so you could just clear left on this case and it'll work, but it's safe to just always clear both. I never use like clear left or clear right. So
more than two.
That just means clear left or clear right.
Oh.
Not that there's two elements.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I might have misspoke when I said the two elements. Cool. So.
Okay, you might just do something like make the footer like be below the main.
Make the footer be below the main.
Yeah, or further down below or something.
Further down below.
No,
yeah.
I'm saying like, because in Android development, you usually always assign things. You can do like make this be below that.
Oh no! I mean, all we have is CSS that are at disposal for now. So yeah, there's really not a way to tell it to do that. It's just, again, it goes back to the document flow that we spoke about earlier, and the order that you put your items in is the way the document is going to go flow downward. Aaron, you had a question?
I was going to say, could you also have, when the footer was falling below the,
Over here?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
could you also have just added a margin to the top and bottom of that, and then it would have fallen below?
I don't know, probably. If we go back, let's get rid of this clear, and give a margin to what, the footer?
To the like footer and this, I guess, sidebar.
Sidebar, yeah, let's see. Margin bottom, maybe? Of what, like 300 pixels? So it's still just flowing into the side over here. Yeah. So I didn't know what was going to happen there. And with CSS, you got to play around with it too, because there's so many rules. You know, it's good to really know the basics well, but like a lot of times it comes down to like experimentation and trying to figure out what the issue is. So yeah, cool. So now we're going to float this. No, what did we say? We didn't float. We cleared. And again, we can use just left, but it's always safe to just use both. I don't do the same thing. All right, so now we've got this guy left here. We had them looking like buttons, right? So we had a widget. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us Twitter. Lack of sleep. All right. So how do we want to style these widgets? Not in CSS, no. But you can style the links however you want. So
Change the color of the links.
yeah, you can make a link look like a button if you wanted to. A lot of times that's what most websites are. When you see a button, oh, click now. It's not like a submit button. It's actually a link that's taking you to another part of the website. So yeah, keep that in mind. You don't have to use buttons when you guys are doing your things. Try to use links instead. A lot of times it's easier than using a button because you actually just need to navigate to another part of the site. And you're not submitting like a form So yeah, style your links, make them look like buttons. So this widget, we're gonna say background color teal. Oh. Color white smoke. And we're gonna give it a little bit of padding. 10 pixels. All right. And the sidebar, we want to get the side. You see what happened here? This took up the entire space of the sidebar. So what we want to do is give this guy some padding, perhaps. It is. So we're going to have an issue where it's going to overflow. Okay. So I did this kind of on purpose now that we're here, because there's one last thing that I want to talk about, and it's border box, which is a way of defining your borders and your margins and everything else. With regular CSS and regular styles, if you add margin to your elements, your entire element's going to grow. Where if you change your display type to border box and you give your element a width of 200, if you give it border or everything else, your element is just going to shrink, but it's always going to keep its outside value of whatever width you gave it. So border box is dope. I love it. It's usually what I use, so we don't run into issues like this. And then all you got to do is go to the body, and this flows down, and you go to border sizing, border, border, display. I'm sorry. No, I forgot the, we're gonna have to do a little Googling here. Border sizing. CSS box sizing. It's just called box sizing. Cool. Box sizing, border box. And now, if we come back to no. All right, well, don't take my word on that, but border box should do that. I'm not sure what's happening here. I'm not gonna troubleshoot this thing completely.
Is it getting overwritten by one or the other?
No, because we're doing the sidebar here, right? 70% body, box sizing, border box.
You inspected the flow issues?
Yeah, I think what needs to be that is the, was it a section that we had here? A container class. But I should be able to apply that style to, oh, what am I doing? I should be able to apply that style to just the body, and it should inherit, unless I'm missing something here. Box sizing, border box. All right, let's use our inspector here. All right, so box sizing, border box is not being overwritten by anything. All right, well, I'll get back to you guys on why that's not working. So what we have to do in a situation like this, when we add more padding to this guy here, let's say we gave it a width of, where were we? 30%. What we can do is we can give it a width of 25% and then give it like a padding of 3%. Okay, and then we just gotta kind of play with it until we get to the right size. Let me get rid of this box sizing stuff here.
Do you need a semicolon after the continue?
This? No. Not if it's just one. Usually you do though if it's, what am I doing here? What's that?
You're trying 2.5%?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do 2%. There we go. Cool. So that gives it a little bit of padding and maybe margin top and bottom so that we have a little bit of space here. Margin top and bottom. Let's give it 10 pixels. And it overflowed again.
Because you have it all the way around. It's
Yeah.
not just
Oh yeah, you're right. 10, 0. When it's 0, you don't need to put PX. And the margins here, why is that not showing up? Oh, the margin needs to go on the widget. I'm sorry. So we were on the sidebar. So now we come to the widget here. We'll do that. And there it is. Now, as you can see, it still looks a little different than what we had before. We had a little bit of space, and our column came all the way down to the bottom. There is one thing that we can do here, how we gave this guy the padding, we could also give it some margin here, and that'll give us the thing that we want, but we're gonna have to shrink this a little bit to maybe 20%, okay? And we lost our color. What happened here? This guy. There we go. But now this guy is bigger than this guy over here. One last thing that we're gonna go over is a new element called Flexbox for CSS. And what it does is when you want columns of equal heights, you just put the parent container, you make a display flex, and then the child containers are gonna adjust their heights to be a smaller height. So if we come to the container, did I get rid of the container altogether? I think I did. And we do display flex, because main and sidebar are part of our children of the container, then this should have the same height. The reason why we're seeing this little bit of gray is probably because of some margin on the top of this guy, and this is what the sidebar, and we only want margin left, so we're going to do 0, 2%. There we go. Okay. So that looks kind of similar. We didn't get it exactly looking like the other one. We'd have to shrink this a little bit, put a corner, put a box radius on this, and when we make it like this, it kind of looks like it now. But yeah, that's pretty much an introduction to CSS. There's so much more to cover. I wish we can go over a lot more stuff. If you guys want tomorrow, I'm gonna do another, I can do another lecture on Bootstrap to show you how Bootstrap works and how it's different from CSS. And that'll go if there is enough interest from today's CSS lecture. You guys just let me know in like the next hour or two so I can start prepping for it. And we'll take it from there. Any questions? What's up?
Hi. Is this going to be the same on every screen? Like, if I were to go on my phone and go to that website, will it look exactly the same?
Yeah, because we use percentages instead of for the width. So if we would have used, instead of percentages, pixels, then we would have, when we shrink down, this part right here would be like over here. All right, and I can show you just a quick example before we wrap it up. Let's see here. So we did width 20%. Let's say we did the width of 200 pixels. And then this was a width of, I don't know, 500 pixels. And we refresh, and now if I, oh, and I made the container too. Hold on. And then if we make this guy smaller, I just zoomed a little bit for you guys. It'll break your thing and it'll flow outside of the normal flow. So yeah, if you want to keep it where it works the same everywhere, use percentages as opposed to using absolute units like pixels.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions? All right, guys, that was Intro to CSS. Yeah, I'm doing a website for somebody. That's it.